With the new creatures roaming the land, they need to find a place to reside. A new forest, a new woods to call home. And thus, Mother Nature rises to the occasion. But not as friendly as Great Nature had hoped.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to the last set review of the Mysterious Fortune, where we're gonna take an in-depth look at the new Neo Nectar card. We already looked at the new cards for Gold Paladin and Great Nature from this set, so if you're interested in those topics, then you can check out those videos, link on top. But today we dive into the new Neo Nectar cards, and with their amazing new token support in the likes of a Boars Dragon, which gives us these supercharged evolved plant tokens that are double the power, have intercept and boost, and as well double shield value. But besides that, we also saw some new Musketeer support in this set, so we can finally build a Musketeer archetype in Standard, which in some regards could also be applied to the premium archetype from the past. So without further ado, let's jump right into these new cards and see what they can mean for Neo Nectar. So first off, we jump into the reprints, and in this case they got 3 reprint triggers: a crit, a draw, and a heal. Just like all the other reprints, it's just 1 star, as it doesn't really add anything special to the mix. Then in this set, as soon as it's their second support wave, they also got their 3rd crit trigger, and that is Intensely Spicy Butler Capsicai. And just like all the extra triggers, it's a 3 stars, as it just opens up more deck space designing. With that, they also got a new starter, and that's this time a Boris Dragon Ratoon. And usually these reprint starters, I'm only going to give them 1 star as they don't add anything to their respective deck. But in this case, I think it's fair to give this one a 3-star rating because it synergizes with the Boris Right Chain, and thanks to the fact that they got this Grade 0 starter, makes their cards work a lot more consistent than it would be if they didn't got the starter in the first place. So for that, I think it justifies the fact that I'm gonna give it a 3-star rating. Then besides that, they also got a new type of vanilla, and that is this time the Grade 2 12k vanilla, and that is Gloriosa Knight. I'm only going to give it 2 stars, as I'm not really super fan of the 12k vanillas. It does have some niche uses, but I already talked about this in previous videos, and that's about everything you can say about this card. Then with the second support wave, they also include the new Drop Draw PG, so just like the other ones, it's a 3-star, and it's a pretty unique artwork for Amimelo Melon. Then with the basics out of the way, let's jump right into the new VR to understand what this new evolved plant token mechanic is going to look like, and we got a better idea of what the raw value is about behind certain cards that interact with the Grade 0 mechanic. So for their new VR from this set, we got the Grade 3 version of a Boars Dragon, that is a Boars Dragon Sephiroth. And Sephiroth's abilities are Continuous of Vanguard Circle. The plant tokens you call are called as Grade 0, Power 10k, Shield 10k, Critical 1, and have Boost and Intercept. So we got a new plant token cards in this set that has these values printed on them, that have the artwork of 3 plant tokens printed on 1 single card. So basically, to achieve these plant tokens, you need to sit on this thing, and every other plant token generating card that already exists out there from the previous set, and also including within this set, will then turn automatically into this new type of tokens. So the skills of the cards themselves don't necessarily create these powerful tokens, and it's thanks to this continuous ability. So this alone makes all your other already existing cards a lot better. But it also got the second ability, which complements its first ability, and it's Act on Vanguard Rearguard Circle once per turn, cost, retire Rearguard, and call up to 2 plant tokens to Rearguard Circle. And if you have 5 or more Rearguards, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So with a full board, it can become a 23 solid unit, so this allows you to generate a lot higher numbers without a problem, because you can call the new token behind it, making it a 33 column, which allows you to go for force 2 to pressure your opponent with a lot of high powered number attacks, with also a lot of crit pressure at the same time. And because the new tokens have intercept and 10k shield, this allows you to turn any card in your hand into 20k shield, but also into 20k power, as you can have a column of 20k, but you can also spread them out on columns to have 2 10k boosters behind a certain unit. This card has almost an infinite value engine going on, and the fact that it works on a rearguard circle means if you have 2 copies on this thing on the field, you can get a lot of value going and beat with high numbers without a lot of issues. So now that we have a basic understanding what Sephiroth can do, let's jump right into the rest of the support, and then we circle back to this card at the end of the video. Then we start off with some generic token support, and we start with this great one, Maiden of Happy Phone. And her ability is very simple. It's auto rearguard circle. When placed, call up to one plant token to rearguard circle. So it's similar to the other great one from the previous sets that unplaced generated token. Well, in this case, it's free, and Rebecca, it costs a Soul Blast, so it's in that regard better, but it doesn't really have a secondary skill attached to it to make it more useful than that. But getting a free token is pretty good, as that combined with our Boars Dragon makes an 18k column. That's a pretty good number that you can hit that will force some shield value from your opponent's side of the field. That doesn't cost you anything, and it's also a 10k shield. So using the great one onto the field, you won't lose 10k shield from your hand, which is pretty nice. But also this has some really impactful premium applications, as this is yet another card that can generate a token on place, which will give your Katrinas even more ammunition, as there is some issue if the game goes a bit too long that it can run out of steam, as they already wasted all their token generating cards in the previous try turn. So with this great one in the mix, they have 4 more bullets to shoot. So for all those applications, I think it's a solid 4-star card, as it is a free token generator, it synergizes with premium as well, and it's a solid versatile offensive and defensive card in combination with Sephiroth. Then another card that can generate tokens is this great free Maiden of Protea, and her ability is act on rearguard circle, cost, retire this unit, and call the free plant tokens to the rearguard circle. So this can help you load up the board quite effectively, and this combined with Sephiroth is quite nice, as if you have Sephiroth and another unit onto the field, and you have this card in hand, you can swarm the field with this card, so you can create free 10k tokens, and then use Sephiroth's ability to sacrifice a token, then generate another 2, and you fill the board, and you fulfill the condition to get the 10k. And it only costs you effectively 1 card from hand to generate all that raw value, which is pretty nice. The only problem is it's not a force grade free, so riding into this thing is really bad, and besides generating the tokens, it doesn't really do anything else. For that, I can only give it 2 stars, as generating free tokens is a lot of value that you can suddenly pump out of this card, but it's somewhat limited in use, as it's also only an act ability on the rearguard circle, so you cannot ride it. It doesn't really work mid-battle, or you call it through different kinds of skills suddenly to the field mid-turn. So it has some limitations, but for pure raw value, it does have some value with it. Now, those were the only 2 cards that could really effectively create tokens outside of the Boris Right Chain themselves. So now we dive into cards that synergizes or interacts with plant tokens or grade zeros that can either empower them or they get beneficial effects out of them. And we start off with this grade 1 support card that is Grain Sprout, Maiden, and Nifa. And her ability is continuous rearguard and Guardian Circle. Your plant tokens in the same column as this unit or on the Guardian Circle cannot be chosen by your opponent's effects and get power plus 5k and shield plus 5k. So in the early game, this is similar to the grade 1 we just talked about, that it can create an 80k column. Only this can also do that in the early game, as you don't have to wait till you have Sephiroth to create a 10k token. But what also is pretty nice is that they give those tokens also extra shield value. So if you have the new 10k tokens and you intercept with them, that's 15k shield. But also the token is then a 15k beater. Then combined with this grade 1, that's a 23k column for free, without doing anything. And the token has resist, meaning they cannot really snipe that interceptor away unless they can also remove this grade 1 and then go after the token, which will force them to waste even more resources, which makes this a very valuable card for a deck that focuses around tokens to some extent, especially the new Ouroboros build that gets most of their value offensively as well as defensively from those tokens, as they can be 10k attackers or boosters and 10k interceptors. And with this grade 1, that's suddenly pumped up to 15k, which is pretty nice. So for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it synergizes pretty nicely with the tokens. It probably won't have some insane premium applications, and for decks that don't really create the 10k tokens, this has some limited limitations, as your tokens will never be able to intercept on their own, as only the 10k version has that ability on the card. Then we get into a grade 2, which I already highlighted in the set breakdown of this set. If you haven't seen that video, then once again, links on top. But this grade 2 is Moral Enlightenment Maida Melia. And Maida Melia's ability is act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost Soul +1, and retire any number of tokens. And until the end of turn, increase this card's power by the sum of original power of the units retired for this cost. So this card will basically get the most value out of all the tokens that you can generate, and will turn this into a massive beatstick, especially with the new 10k tokens, as retiring 3 tokens, that's turning this thing into a 40k. So those are numbers which will dwarf Kaivent. Now you can get the maximum amount of value out of your token generation that will get the most bang for your buck, basically. So for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as the only issue is why it's not really that high up in the ladder is that this card on its own doesn't really do anything. If you don't have enough token generation, or you have enough tokens to spare, you cannot really benefit from this ability. And also, the fact that you destroy your tokens means that if you cannot replenish them, then this ability is limited to some extent. So the amount of applications where this can be used, or the amount of decks this can be used, is somewhat limited, and that's why I only can give it a 3-star rating. Then next we got a very interesting grade 1 that doesn't necessarily interact with grade 0s or with tokens, but if you read the skill between the lines, it basically states that you want to interact it with the new 10k tokens. And I'm of course referring to this eggplant, Sergeant Mal Nasu. And its ability is auto rearguard circle. When placed from hand to the rearguard circle with another power 10k unit, draw a card, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So basically, what this card wants you to do is call this thing on the same circle where a 10k power unit resides. So either a grade 2 10k or the new 10k vanilla tokens. If you place this thing on top of a grade 2, it's a cycle. But if you place it on top of a token, it's a direct +1, which is actually pretty nice. The only problem is with this card is just that it's just a 5k, and if you cannot activate its ability, you're not really getting any value out of it. And another negative part about this card is that it needs to be precisely a 10k unit. So if you have a unit that continuously gets more power, that would have a 10k base, but because of that ability will be increasing, like for example you have a plant token, but the grade 1 is behind it that can give it a passive plus 5k, then suddenly this doesn't work. However, that will make it work with the old plant token. So there are some intricate synergies between all the different cards within the set with this card as well, so it's very interesting. But overall, I think I can give this one a 3-star, as it's a effective cycle in certain situations, but will keep you retaining the value on the board. And in some situations, this can effectively be a 3+1. And 3 pluses are always pretty nice. Then next up, we've got the new Battle Dorey for Neo Nectar, as everybody apparently is going to get the Battle Dorey. And in their case, that's this grade 2 Primal Veen Dragon. And its ability is continuous Vanguard to rearguard circle. During the battle, it attacked a Vanguard while boosted by a grade 0, basically a token. When your opponent would call cards from the hand to the Guardian Circle, he or she must call 2 cards or more at the same time. So if this card is being boosted by a grade 0, aka a plant token, it will be a Battle Dorey attack. This is actually pretty fine, even though it's a 9k body on both sides of the spectrum. And what I mean with that is being boosted by a 5k or 10k token. If it's a 5k, it's a 40k column, which will hit almost any type of Vanguard, which means you're gonna force them to overguard if they cannot intercept. But if you boost it by a 10k, then this becomes a 90k attack, and that means even if they have interceptors, they probably cannot block it with only interceptors unless they have a 10k interceptor or they have 2 interceptors that they can use. So that way you have a more consistent way of getting more value out of the Battle Dorey skill. So overall, I think it's a 3-star card. It's not the amazing type of Battle Dorey skill that will help Neo Nectar in a big way, but this Battle Dorey effect will not cost you any extra resources, and you can swing with it turn after turn after turn after turn with the same restriction, unlike certain other classes that need to pump in more value or resources to keep generating that guard restrict. So yeah, for that I think it's a solid Battle Dorey effect with a 3-star rating. Then next we got a new grade 1 that is very similar to a just recently revealed card, and I'm referring to Lamplight of Elegance, Yona. And its ability is, and this might sound familiar, act on the rearguard circle, once per turn cast Counterblast 2, and until the end of turn, increase the power of 2 of your other grade 1s or less units by those units' original power. So for Counterblast 2, you can turn your normal tokens from a 5k into a 10k, or you can turn your grade 1s potentially from 8k into a 16k, which either gives you plus 10k on the board overall, or gives you plus 16k on the board overall. But it can also interact with the new 10k tokens, which will give you plus 20k power on the board overall. And act, Counterblast 2, a once per turn, plus 20k on the field, sounds oddly familiar. The only difference is, this card comes with an 8k body attached of it, and you can share the power with different units, so you can spread out the power. I have high regard for Power Rise Elixir, not because of the value that you're getting necessarily, but mainly because it can be used in any clan, so there are bound to be certain clans that can abuse this interaction, like Chrono Tiger, for example, or Aquaforce, for example. So, in this case, for Neo Nectar, I can only give this card actually a 1 star. Because Counterblessing 2 for just some power ain't gonna cut it. Probably you can get away with running this in Boars Dragon, as you're not gonna run a lot of Counterblast cards, but there is a Counterblast card that we're gonna go over soon that is miles ahead of this card, and you rather want to waste your resources on that card than this card instead. So this one is gonna get a 1 star, but probably when we go over the Power Rise Elixir, I'm gonna give that card a higher rating, mainly because of the fact that it can be used in any clan out there. But this is basically a Power Rise Elixir on a body, but only for Neo Nectar. Then we go over another massive beatstick for Neo Nectar, which allows us to play more with Force 2, and that is this grade 3, Force Marker grade 3, Fruits a Sword Dragon. And its ability reads as followings: continues on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. During your turn, increase this unit's power by the sum of the original power of all your grade 0 rearguards. So where we had the grade 2, that for a soulless and retiring the amount of tokens to get their power, this one will just get them inherently by just existing on the field. This is in some regards better than that grade 2, as it doesn't cost you anything. But the only downside is to this card is that those tokens need to stay on the field. With the grade 2, you can retire them, get the power, and then call maybe better units in replace of them in scenarios where you don't want to play your Boris right chain and you just have generic 5k tokens. So both have their own favorable situations. But in this case, with the new support, this is definitely a 4-star card in my opinion, as this thing can be scary with the 10k tokens, as just having 3 tokens onto the board, this thing hits for 43k. And the 10k tokens behind it, that's a 53k. Sure, it doesn't have a guard restrict, but if you don't have PGs, because you're already going to PG the Vanguard most likely, if this is beneath a Force 2, yeah, this can be very scary. And that basically wraps up the token support. But before we go into the Ouroboros right chain cards, let's take a look at the new Musketeer cards that can round up the new Musketeer engine and might be even a fun tier 2 or tier 3 budget alternative. And we started with this grade 1 and premium Musketeer Gaston. And Gaston's ability is continuous rearguard circle. During the turn, it was placed from the deck. This unit gets power plus 10k. So this is a somewhat limited card effect, as it needs to be called from deck to gain the power, but having an 18k booster in combination with other cards within the Musketeer engine that can already ramp up power, as just with the grade 2, that's already 28k column. But with the previous VR Cecilia, that column can potentially get another 10k, then suddenly you're looking at 38k. And these columns can swing out turn after turn and very quickly with a higher value. So you can either go with Force 2 and Force 1 just like the Ouroboros right chain engine. So this, in my opinion, is a pretty okay solid booster, and I can give it 3 stars. If it was more versatile in the way that you can use it, it could be bumped up to 4 stars, but because you need to precisely call from deck, it's somewhat limited. But that doesn't mean the card is really terrible, because we got more Musketeer supports that keep superior calling units from the deck, so it's highly likely you're just going to activate this ability. And even though it's only during the time it was placed, they have abilities that need you to sacrifice units, so at the time that you need to sacrifice something, you can just sacrifice this thing away once it's already bloated load, and yeah, it's a pretty easy decision to make then. Then we get into the new duo for Musketeer, their main engine cards, and we start off with this grade 2, that is Peony Musketeer Dorey. And her ability is auto Vanguard the rearguard circle when placed, cost counter +1, and retire a rearguard. So you can basically retire Gaston the turn after you called it. Look at the free cards from the top of your deck, call up to 2 cards with Musketeer in their card names, or any one card from among them to the rearguard circle, and put the rest on the bottom of the deck in any order. So, for a counterblast and a sacrifice, you can either call 2 Musketeer units, so you go +1, or you can call a non-Musketeer unit, as maybe you run certain cards that you want to call off that are very potent within the Musketeer engine, so you can then take the 1-for-1 trade, so it somewhat becomes a cycle that costs you a counterblast. This is a pretty solid rush card, as you can ride it on Vanguard Circle, you can call it in the early game, you can basically push for game very early on, as on turn 1, you can flood the board in some regards, maybe call 1 or 2 attacks, you don't mind getting them a defensive trigger, because sure, they have a defensive trigger, but next turn, you can then retire that unit, get more units onto the board, start swinging once again, and you can keep repeating this process even into the grade 3 games, as we're going to see with the next card, and also we've seen this with Cecilia. So overall, I think this is solid 4-star card, as it's a pretty nice engine piece for the Musketeer engine as a whole, but also because it can search out a non-Musketeer unit, makes it somewhat useful in a hybrid deck, or also in a non-Musketeer strategy. So it's an interesting way of designing the card to give it more breathing room and also give it more potential lifespans once we get more support that might not even focus on the Musketeer engine as a whole. And now we go to the card which I've been foreshadowing a little bit, and that's the grade 3 version of the Musketeer. That's Peony Musketeer Martina. And her ability is act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, soul +1, and retire rearguard. Look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, call 1 card from among them to the rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So, if you just look at this skill, it's basically a weaker Cecilia, but at the same time a more sustainable Cecilia, because it doesn't cost a counterblast. But in the Cecilia case, you can call 2, and in late game 3 units, and give power. So it's way more value, which justifies the counterblast cost. But that doesn't make this card outright terrible, as with this you will have a very solid second right target in the midst that you cannot write into Cecilia, or you only have 1 Cecilia in hand and discard. You're definitely gonna write this thing first, so you write into Cecilia the following turn, so you have full power Cecilia going on. This way the deck has more consistency in a late game potential. But that's not the main reason what makes this card great, as that is the second ability that is continuous on rearguard circle. During the turn it was placed from the deck, this unit gets power +5k and critical +1. And because of this ability, you will now have way more pressure with all your superior and call effects, and you can even have this thing going early game with the grade 2, for example, that you can cheese out this a turn earlier, or just with Cecilia as a general, because now you can still focus on playing Force 1, but still come in with crit pressure, which might overwhelm your opponent. And this aggressive playstyle is really showcasing what Musketeer is going all about. Where Boris Dragon has also a somewhat aggressive playstyle, but will go more for the value game, Musketeer is all about tempo. But what also makes this card pretty insanely potent and deadly is in the premium landscape, because this thing will get a crit and +5k power when it's called from deck. With Katrina, you can search out this card whenever you want, which means you can always swing in with a potential crit unit. That, in a Katrina playstyle, can be deadly. This thing has a lot of applications as well in standard as in premium. So I cannot give this card other than a 5-star rating. It makes Cecilia and the rest of the Musketeer engine and even Neo Nectar as a whole a lot more deadlier, thanks to the fact that once you search this thing out, you will have a crit pressure unit, which is pretty damn nice. Then with the Musketeer behind us, we dive into the main right chain support of this set, and that is the Boars Dragon card. And we start off with our grade 1 right chain unit, and it is our Boars Dragon Branch, and its ability is auto Vanguard the rearguard circle when it attacks, or the attack it boosted hits, which can be Vanguard or rearguard. You may look at the 4 cards on the top of your deck. If you do, reveal up to 1 card with Arboreus in its card name from among them and put it into your hand. and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this thing, on attack or boosted, can give you some hit pressure and can potentially give you free pluses. The only downside is that if you see a lot of trigger units, you are forced to put them onto the bottom of the deck, so you're probably not going to see them for a long while. But at the same time, if you have a couple of these things on the board, then suddenly you can have a mini Tsukiyomi going on, as it also interacts with hitting into the rearguard. So if you want to play for this playstyle in this different kind of way, for more going for the long game, then you can activate this ability by forcing it by ramming into your opponent's rearguards and basically get a Neo Nectar kind of stack going on, just like Lucriere can do that suddenly for Pale Moon. So yeah, that's an interesting strategy that you can apply with this grade 1. So overall, I think it's a solid 4-star card, as it gives you good hit pressure, it gives you potentially free pluses, and you might even go with a mini Tsukiyomi kind of playstyle, especially with the amount of value the deck can generate, that you can go into the long haul. Then we get into the grade 2, which is a token generator, but also a mini Sephiroth card, and that is a Boars Dragon Timber. And its abilities are Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed, the next plant token you call this turn is called as a grade 0, 10k power, 10k shield, critical 1, and has the boost and intercept ability. So basically, if you ride this thing, the very first plant token you generate will be the new 10k vanilla, which helps with the aggressive nature and the tempo playstyle that you want to do if you want to go for this raw value. And that synergizes with its rearguard ability, as its second ability is Auto and Rearguard Circle. When placed, you may call a plant token to the rearguard circle. So if you have 2 of these cards in your hand, you can ride one, then call one, and generate a token. And if you do it all in the front row, then you have 3 10k attacks ready, and as well as a 10k interceptor and a 5k interceptor. So overall, I think this is also, once again, a 4-star card. And most of the value comes from the fact that you can now cheese out a stronger token in the early game. It's also a token generator, which can interact once again with Premium Katrina as another ammunition for their machine gun fire of plant tokens. But also the fact that it just has the Boris name, as that will synergize with the next card, as that is Boars Dragon's most trusted and loyal servant, Gil of Boris, Oliver. And its ability is act on Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle once per turn. If your soul has 2 or more cards with Boris in its card name, this is where the starter comes into play, as then you only need to ride to grade 1 or the grade 2. Cost, counter plus 1, and resolve one of the effects below. Call 2 plant tokens to the Rearguard Circle, or cost, retire 2 rearguards, and this unit gets power plus 20k and critical plus 1 until the end of turn. So basically what this can do is it can turn your Boris Sephiroth ability from generating 2 tokens into giving this unit plus 20k in a crit for a counterblast, but this unit can also refund its own cost, as you can counterblast 1, create 2 tokens, and the following turn counterblast 1, sack those 2 tokens, and put their power into this unit and get the extra critical. The fact that this works as a Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle makes this insanely good, as you can ride the grade 1 of Boris Dragon. If you can ride up the grade 1 of Boris Dragon and then follow it up with this card, then suddenly you can have a potential 30k crit 2 Vanguard on turn 2, which will pressure your opponent for a lot of damage early on. And that can seal the game very quickly, especially if you then follow up with a grade 3 turn, which will go into Force 2, and maybe doesn't even need to resort to Force 2 if you already put your opponent at 4 or 5 damage with the extra crit pressure of this grade 2 turn. If you combine this with a Boris Dragon in general, then you can have this thing become a 40k column with another 10k token behind it that has an inherent crit, but if you combine that with Force 2, that's free crit. That's a free crit attack that your opponent is staring down. That is 40k. With also potentially a Vanguard that swings in with a crit, or you will drive check some crits, as you're probably gonna run a lot of crits. This card is insane, and I think it's a solid 5-star card, as it makes the Boris engine a very aggressive playstyle and have a lot of value. And this card allows that to be it, as without this card, the deck would probably be a very grindy type of deck that will outvalue your opponents. But with this grade 2, you can effectively just out-tempo them potentially and just rush them, and they cannot do anything about them than just discarding their entire hand to try to survive this onslaught. So yeah, a very good solid support card for the Boris engine. Now that we've discussed all the cards, let's circle back to the VR and see how this all comes back in a full circle. So back with our Boars Dragon Sephiroth, we know it can continuously allow us to generate the 10k tokens, which we discussed with all these skills, as that's what the engine wants to do. So all these new token generators will get these 10k power, but also the cards like Fruits Sword Dragon will be able to hit for a gigantic beatstick number, as it will take all the 10k power on top of itself. And that, combined with the fact that this unit in itself can generate 2 tokens for the cost of 1 token or just 1 card in hand, is pretty nuts. It allows you to outvalue your opponent on a consistent basis. This grade 3 allows you to generate easily 33k columns on all your columns. So you can pump out at least 3 different attacks that hit for at least 30k or higher, and in some cases even 50 or 60, which can make you afford to go for Force 2, as having more power on top of that might not really be necessary. But with the introduction of Olafur and with inherently the right chain, makes it possible to even go for Force 1 if you can pressure them with a early crit. And that can be really devastating if that goes through. So the new Boris Dragon card, in my opinion, with all the raw value attached to it, is definitely a 5-star card in my opinion. You can almost say it's better in some regards than Cecilia, but honestly, I think these cards work too differently to compare them. Yes, they are all about value and generating a lot of power, but Cecilia can deck thing and get your resources through that way and get some benefits off from units that get benefits from being called from the deck, like the whole Musketeer engine. But Boris Dragon Sephiroth can just inherently create value for free consistently, but it will not deck thin you, so the chance that your drive checking triggers will not increase. And that is the difference between the 2 units. And I think Boris Dragon Sephiroth is a solid 5-star card, which allows Neo Nectar to play a different kind of playstyle, more about supercharged powerful tokens. And who knows, we might come back to this mechanic in the future with our shop. But we have to wait and see what the new support for Neo Nectar is going to bring. But in the meantime, they got some pretty solid support. And that basically rounds up this set review for Neo Nectar. This set provides us with some interesting new concepts, as we got this new evolution token mechanic with the 10k tokens, and all these new cards that interact with them either by taking their power or basically using their tokens and absorbing their value into their own being, and then getting more powerful units onto the board. But also some generic support that can create tokens. But interesting enough, we also get a new actual archetype out of the set, that is the Musketeer engine. Even though we had Cecilia and a lot of Musketeer support in the first wave with Ultra Rare, it didn't really feel like a archetype in itself. But now with the addition of these 3 new Musketeers, it actually feels like a complete new deck. And it's mainly because of the grade 2 and the grade 3. So yeah, I think that's really awesome to see that how 2 cards can change the entire feeling of a support wave that we already had a year ago. So yeah, very curious stuff and very interesting things that came out of this support wave for Neo Nectar. And that basically rounds up everything that we can analyze and talk about this set for Neo Nectar as a whole. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of these new cards for Neo Nectar. Are you very excited about this new type of plant token coming to fruition, and the fact that Bushiroad is gonna, instead of building upon the already existing token, that they more going to a horizontal approach where they kind of introduce more and more different types of plant tokens for the clan. For me personally, that's very exciting news, as it can open up a lot more playstyles and different ways to support the clan as a whole without focusing on one single thing. Because the problem with plant tokens, when we got the first wave support, I couldn't really think of anything that they can increase or upgrade the deck, as they already could swarm the field, get value, and create powerful lanes. Now, with the concept of increasing the amount of separate versions of plant tokens, then it opens up the field completely. If you're interested in more content concerning the Mysterious Fortune, so information about Gold Paladin, Great Nature, and Neo Nectar, then stick around on the channel as we're going to dive into the spotlights for the respective VR builds very soon. And afterwards, we're going to cover the budget deck builds for these separate decks of this set. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support this channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Thief, and I see you guys in the next one!